Welcome back to Family Secrets Unveiled. There are stories, and then there are legends whispered in the dark corners of old houses, tales so drenched in tragedy and impossibility that they feel like they belong to a different world. But what if one of those legends walked right into your meticulously planned, perfectly ordinary life? What if the impossible wasn't just a ghost story, but a guest on your wedding day? This is the tale of Elara and Julian Thorne, a couple who thought they had it all. A restored Victorian home in coastal Maine, careers that flourished without demanding too much, and a love that, frankly, seemed too good to be true. They were celebrating their 10th anniversary, a milestone Julian had insisted on marking with a lavish, intimate party. Not a grand, sweeping affair, but a curated evening for their closest friends and family, the 30 people who had witnessed their journey and celebrated their quiet, unwavering devotion. Elara, a historian with a meticulous eye for detail, had handled the guest list with her usual precision, cross-referencing names, confirming dietary restrictions, double-checking addresses. She'd confided to her sister, a list as familiar and comfortable as her favorite worn leather armchair. The invitation suite was delivered 3 weeks before the event, a heavy cream stock with elegant, copperplate calligraphy. It was a beautiful, tangible representation of their happiness. Julian was upstairs in his study, a cavernous room filled with nautical maps and the smell of old paper, when Elara brought up the last box of RSVPs. 30 down, 30 in, she announced, her voice light with satisfaction. Everyone's coming. Even Aunt Beatrice, bless her heart, is taking the train up from Boston. Julian smiled, but it was a little distant, the way it sometimes was when he was engrossed in a particularly challenging financial report. He took the box from her, his gaze momentarily fixed on the stack of cream envelopes. It wasn't until the day before the party, when Elara was finalizing the seating chart, that the anomaly, the subtle, impossible tear in the fabric of their perfect life, appeared. She was matching the place cards to the elegant mahogany table, running her finger down the alphabetized list she had typed out. Everything was correct: Anderson, Baker, Carmichael. But then, between Morris and Pritchard, there it was. A name she had not, absolutely could not have added. A card, handwritten, not in her elegant, looping script, but in a strange, antiquated hand that looked like it had been lifted directly from a 19th-century ledger. Isolde Vance. Elara stopped breathing for a beat. Isolde Vance. The name hung in the quiet, sun-drenched dining room like a shard of ice. She knew that name. She knew that name from the faded, brittle pages of the Thorne family history she had researched for a project years ago, a history Julian had dismissed as quaint nonsense. Isolde Vance was Julian's great-great-aunt, a woman who had, according to town records, tragically perished in a sudden, violent fever outbreak in 1888 at the age of 24. A woman who had been dead for 137 years. Elara's mind raced. It had to be a mistake. A misplaced joke. Had Julian done it? No, he wasn't prone to such macabre humor, especially not for such an important night. She checked the master list, the meticulously typed one on her laptop. 30 names. Isolde Vance was not on it. She looked at the RSVP cards again. 30 envelopes. She counted them. 30. But on the seating chart list now, the one she had just pulled from the box Julian had taken, there were 31. And the 31st name was Isolde Vance, written in that archaic, unsettling script. A cold knot of dread formed in her stomach. She went back to the box of RSVPs. She sifted through the envelopes again, slower this time. And then she found it. Tucked into the very bottom, almost adhering to the velvet lining, was a thin, brittle envelope, a color that was closer to bone than cream. It was sealed with a wax stamp, the impression a complicated, almost forgotten family crest Julian had once shown her, an old Thorne seal. The address on the envelope was hers, but the handwriting was the same as on the place card, elegant, spidery, and utterly dead. The postmark? It was smudged, illegible, but the stamp was a design that hadn't been in circulation since the early 1900s. She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside, a simple card. It did not confirm attendance, It stated it. "The honor will be mine to attend the celebration of the Thorne union. I am eager to see the old house again. Yours in perpetual kinship, IV." The sheer impossibility of the moment was paralyzing. This wasn't a prank. This was physical evidence of something utterly outside the bounds of reality. And it wasn't the only one. Driven by a mounting icy terror, Elara frantically checked the other place cards. Jonathan Albright. She knew him. But wait, Jonathan Albright had died in a boating accident 6 years ago, an unspeakable tragedy. His widow, Sarah, was coming. Sarah's name was on the list. But there, next to Sarah's card, was one for Jonathan, in the same unsettling, antique script. The guest list had names of people long dead. The discovery was a punch to the gut, a dizzying collision of her orderly world with a terrifying, inexplicable truth. 30 invited guests. But 34 place cards. For names that had belonged to the earth for decades. She gathered the 4 row cards, their presence radiating a cold, palpable wrongness. She had to talk to Julian. He had handled the box last. He had looked at the envelopes. Did he know? Or was he, too, a victim of this terrifying, spectral clerical error? The answer, she knew, would either restore her sanity or shatter the foundation of their 10-year marriage. She tucked the cards into her desk drawer, the wood cool beneath her hand, and waited for the sound of Julian's footsteps descending the stairs. The air in the dining room felt heavy, suffocating. Elara had tried to compose herself, to rehearse a rational explanation for the 4 cards, but the words felt hollow, ridiculous, even in the silence of the house. How do you rationally explain a RSVP from a woman who died in the 19th century? When Julian finally walked in, the setting sun catching the gold flecks in his hair, he looked effortlessly handsome, utterly normal. And that normalcy, that blissful ignorance or terrifying pretense, only intensified Elara's dread. She didn't lead up to it. She couldn't. "Julian," she said, her voice tight, "I need you to look at something." Something about the seating chart. He raised an eyebrow, a slight, good-natured look of exasperation. "The seating chart? Love, you've been working on that for a week. Is Aunt Beatrice demanding to sit by the window again?" "No. It's the names." She pulled the 4 cards from the drawer. Isolde Vance, Jonathan Albright, and 2 others whose family ties she hadn't yet managed to trace, Marcus Gray and Lydia Thorne. Both names rang distant, unsettling bells from the Thorne archives. She laid them on the dark wood table, the antique script glowing faintly in the dimming light. Julian's face went utterly, chillingly blank. The easy smile vanished, replaced by an expression Elara had never seen before, a mask of stark, unadulterated fear, quickly followed by a strained, unconvincing attempt at control. He didn't reach for them. He didn't question them. His eyes darted to the cards, then to the drawer, then back to Elara, a flicker of panic illuminating the blue of his irises. Where did you find these, Elara?" His voice was low, strained, the question sounding less like curiosity and more like a desperate interrogation. "They were in the box of RSVPs you brought down yesterday. Mixed in with the others, but clearly not sent by our living guests." She watched him, her historian's eye dissecting his micro-expressions. Isolde Vance, Julian. She died in 1888. Jonathan Albright. 6 years ago. Why are their names on our seating chart? Julian took a deep, shuddering breath. He finally picked up the Isolde card, his thumb brushing over the old, ornate script. "It's a mistake, Elara. It has to be. A sick joke. Maybe the printer we used for the calligraphy is playing some kind of prank. You know how eccentric Mr. Finch is." The explanation was weak, pathetic even, and it didn't match the tremor in his hand. Elara felt a surge of cold anger. "Don't insult my intelligence, Julian. These aren't printed. They're handwritten, and they came with RSVPs that were postmarked a century ago, with a stamp that hasn't been used since our grandparents were children. This isn't Mr. Finch. This is something else. This is a secret you know something about." The word secret hung in the air, a bell tolling a decade of lies. Julian dropped the card as if it had burned him. He turned away, running a hand through his perfect hair, the picture of a man cornered. The easy charm had evaporated, replaced by a desperate, trapped energy. Elara, I never meant for you to find these, he confessed, his back still to her. I thought I had removed them. I tried. They keep reappearing. The admission was more terrifying than a denial. Reappearing, she whispered. Julian, what in God's name is going on? Who are these people? And why are they RSVPing to our anniversary party? He turned back, his face etched with a genuine, heartbreaking pain. There, the guest list. Not ours, Elara. The houses. Or perhaps, the families. Listen to me. When my grandfather left me this house, he left a lot of things unsaid. When I started the renovations 10 years ago, I found a locked box in the wall behind the fireplace. Inside was a journal. A history, really, of the Thorne line, stretching back 2 centuries. He paused, gathering his courage. It wasn't a family tree, Elara. It was a ledger. And on the first page, written in the same hand as those cards, was a list. A list of names. Isolde Vance, Jonathan Albright, Marcus Gray, Lydia Thorne, and dozens of others. All dead. And beneath the list, a single sentence. The gathering must be honored on the 10-year marker. Elara felt the blood drain from her face. The gathering? Honored? What does that mean, Julian? It means, he said, stepping closer, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper, that 10 years ago, when we moved in, when we unknowingly marked the 10-year marker from the last major Thorne family event here, the death of my great-uncle. I was supposed to host them. The dead. I was supposed to invite them, provide the dinner, and let them gather. He reached out and took her hands, his palms clammy and cold. I was terrified, Elara. I burned the journal. I smashed the lockbox. I told myself it was superstitious rot, an old man's madness. But the following year, the invitations started arriving. First just 1, then 2. Always in the old script, always demanding a place. And always on the night of our anniversary. He looked into her eyes, pleading for belief. I've been intercepting them for 10 years. I've been destroying them. But this year, forgot through. And now you've seen them. The secret isn't that I invited them, Elara. The secret is that they don't need an invitation to come. The invitation is merely a formality. They're coming because the house, the Thorne family, has a debt. The confession was a brutal, terrifying revelation. Julian had not married her despite a secret. He had married her and built a life around a terrifying, recurring supernatural obligation. He had been living a lie for a decade, protecting her from a darkness she hadn't known existed. The relief of the secret being out was immediately overshadowed by the chilling knowledge that the guests were, impossibly, expected. They were coming tonight. The doorbell would ring, and on the other side would stand not the living, but the honored dead. The thought of the impending dinner party, the clinking of glasses, the sound of laughter mingling with the hushed presence of 4 centuries-old ghosts, sent a shiver of pure, existential dread down her spine. The perfect anniversary celebration had just become a terrifying, macabre séance. But the debt, the gathering, what did they want? And what would happen if the debt wasn't paid? The answer, she feared, lay not in Julian's journal, but in the history of the house itself. The moment the first of the living guests arrived, the tension in the house became almost unbearable. Elara, pale but resolute, stood beside Julian near the drawing-room entrance. They had made a frantic, silent agreement: act normal. Maintain the facade. There were 30 people who knew nothing of the debt, the journal, or the 4 spectral invitations tucked away in a locked box in the study. Aunt Beatrice, bless her, was the first. She swept in, smelling of lavender and old lace, complaining about the draft near the window, blissfully unaware that the greatest draft was the one blowing from the grave. Elara forced a smile, accepted a kiss, and watched as the room filled with the comfortable murmur of conversation, a stark contrast to the silent, screaming terror inside her. Julian was a maestro of deception. He laughed, he toasted, he complimented the wine, his hands never quite still, his eyes constantly scanning the doorway, waiting for a ring that would signal the arrival of the impossible. Elara found herself doing the same, a knot of pure ice forming in her stomach every time the doorbell chimed. Please, let it be Sarah, not Jonathan. Please, let it be the caterers, not Isolde. It was during the toast, a moment that should have been the pinnacle of their anniversary joy, that the real shift occurred. Julian stood, holding his crystal glass, his voice clear and resonant as he spoke of their 10 years of unwavering love and mutual understanding. It was a beautiful speech, a beautiful lie. As he finished, his eyes, still scanning the room, suddenly locked onto something near the doorway. His glass clattered, not quite falling, but sending a sharp, dissonant ping across the room. All eyes turned. Standing by the restored mahogany coat rack, where only a moment before there had been an empty space, was a woman. She was strikingly beautiful in a dress that looked like spun moonlight, a style that had been fashionable around the turn of the century. Her hair was a dark, intricate knot, and her eyes, a piercing shade of gray, seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. She wasn't translucent. She was dense, a point of absolute stillness in a room full of movement. She was Isolde Vance. And she was not alone. Trailing behind her, standing just inside the main hall, were 3 men. One a handsome, mournful figure who could only be Jonathan Albright. The other 2, Marcus Gray and Lydia Thorne, were harder to place, but their antique clothing and unnerving stillness spoke volumes. The room, moments before buzzing with conversation, went silent. Not a sudden, dramatic silence, but a slow, creeping cessation of sound, as if the air itself was thickening, absorbing the happy noise. The living guests instinctively sensed the wrongness. They didn't scream, they simply stopped. Julian didn't hesitate. He looked at Elara, a look of desperate apology and utter finality. "Elara," he said, his voice a ragged whisper. "I have to do this. I have to finish the ritual." "The ritual?" Elara gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. This wasn't just a gathering, it was a demand. Julian walked towards Isolde. "Welcome," he said, his voice surprisingly firm, the voice of the Thorne heir finally accepting his burden. "We have prepared for the gathering. The places are set." But Isolde didn't move. Her gray eyes fixed not on Julian, but on Elara. A small, chilling smile touched her lips. "The debt is not merely dinner, young Julian. The debt is the bloodline. The debt is the balance. And the contract was made with a different Thorne. Your father." The revelation hit like a physical blow. "My father." Julian's composure shattered. His father, a man who had abandoned the family years ago, who had died mysteriously abroad. Isolde glided forward, her movements unnervingly smooth, not walking but floating inches above the antique rug. "The gathering is not an annual party, dear boy. It is a sacrifice. Every 10 years, one member of the Thorne line, the one who occupies this house, must take the place of one who desires to return. Your father failed to honor the contract 10 years ago. He ran. And the debt doubled. Now, 2 must be given." The horrifying truth unfolded like a poisonous flower. The gathering was a terrible exchange, a life for a life, to be conducted every 10 years. Julian hadn't been protecting Elara from a secret. He had been delaying a sacrifice that was now exponentially worse. Elara stared at Isolde, a wave of sickening clarity washing over her. "Lydia Thorne," Elara whispered, the name of one of the other dead guests clicking into place in her historian's mind. She was the sister who was never spoken of. She died in childbirth in 1945, right here in this house. The rumors said she was insane. The real story, she was the sacrifice 10 years before Julian's father ran. Isolde's smile widened, a truly terrifying, antique expression of triumph. "A quick student." "Yes." "Lydia was returned to us. And now, Julian, you must decide. Who will join Lydia in the earth? Yourself? Or your lovely, unsuspecting wife, who has already mapped out a life that is no longer hers?" The room descended into chaos. The living guests, finally understanding the horror, began to back away, whispering, screaming, but the spectral guests blocked the main exit, standing like granite sentinels. Julian, pale and shaking, turned to Elara. Elara, I love you. I tried to stop this. I love you. Don't you dare, she hissed, her voice low and fierce, the love and terror battling within her. Don't you dare try to be noble now, Julian. You knew the risk of this house. You knew the cost. The choice was stark. Julian would sacrifice himself, or he would condemn Elara. But Elara, the historian, had one more card to play, a piece of knowledge Isolde might not have expected. She had studied the archives. She knew the original contract wasn't with the Thornes. She stepped past Julian, directly into Isolde's chilling gaze. The contract is void, Elara stated, her voice trembling but steady. The original contract was for land, not blood. And it was signed by Marcus Grey, not a Thorne. The dead is to him, and he has a choice. Take the land back or take your place, Isolde. The wording of the pact is clear. A life from the current gathering must be given for the one who desires to return. She pointed past Isolde to the silent figure of Marcus Grey, the third spectral guest. Marcus Grey, you are the original creditor. This is your chance. Take the deed or take Isolde's place. The Thorne blood has been spilled enough. It was a desperate gamble based on a footnote in a century-old deed, but the effect was immediate. Isolde's composure cracked. The ghostly light in the room flickered. Marcus Grey, silent until now, took a step forward, his eyes fixed on Isolde, not on the deed to the house. The contract, Elara knew, always had a loophole for the truly desperate. The confrontation in the drawing room was not a battle of strength, but a terrifying clash of wills, a desperate theological debate with life and death as the stakes. When Marcus Grey, the spectral creditor, took that silent step, the air around Isolde Vance, the relentless enforcer, began to ripple. Isolde turned her blazing gray eyes on Marcus. You would betray the terms? You would break the ancient promise for a patch of coastal rock. Marcus, his face a study in eternal regret, simply shook his head. The promise was to protect my family's rest, Isolde, not to perpetuate the curse of your ambition. I choose rest. And the debt is paid. The words, the debt is paid, echoed in the sudden, absolute stillness of the room, a chilling finality. At that very instant, a powerful, unseen force seemed to sweep through the house, a violent, chilling gust of wind that extinguished every candle, plunging the drawing room into pitch darkness. The terrified screams of the living guests were cut short by the sound of splintering wood and shattering glass. Elara heard Julian cry out her name, his voice thick with fear and a terrible, belated understanding of the depth of her action. When the light returned, a harsh, ordinary flash from the emergency lighting, the room was empty of the spectral visitors. Isolde, Jonathan, Marcus, and Lydia were gone. The only evidence of their presence was the faint, lingering scent of petrichor and ancient dust, and the 4 empty, ornate place cards that had fluttered to the floor near the hearth. Julian was on his knees, his face buried in his hands, trembling with a mixture of terror and relief. The living guests, shaken but physically unharmed, stumbled toward the doors, their polite veneer utterly shattered. Aunt Beatrice was quietly hyperventilating into a napkin. No one needed an explanation. The silence of the night was louder than any confession. The party was over. The marriage, however, was not. In the days that followed, the silence between Elara and Julian was heavier than any spoken word. Elara hadn't saved the marriage. She had saved Julian's life and her own. She had saved him from a spectral contract, but she couldn't save him from the decade of lies. Why didn't you tell me, Julian? She finally asked him, 2 weeks later, standing in the empty drawing room, the scent of fresh paint covering the lingering horror. Because I loved you, he whispered, the truth stripped bare of all romanticism. Because I knew you would have left. And I couldn't bear to lose you and the house. The house, it's a part of me, Elara. It's the Thorne blood. It's the curse. No, Elara countered, her eyes hard. The house is just wood and stone. The curse is the secret. The curse is thinking you can live a beautiful, honest life on a foundation of generational deceit. You didn't tell me because you didn't trust me to face the truth with you. The resolution was not a reconciliation, but an acceptance of a horrifying new reality. Julian sold the house. Not just the physical structure, but the entire coastal plot, the cursed land that Marcus Gray had, in the end, refused to take back. They moved to a sterile, modern apartment in the city, the antithesis of the old Victorian. The Thorne bloodline, Julian acknowledged, needed to be broken from the soil it haunted. They stayed together, an odd, scarred pair, their love now a strange mixture of resentment, pity, and a profound, life-altering gratitude. They were bound not by a shared dream, but by a shared nightmare. The memory of the spectral guests, the names of the long dead on their anniversary guest list, became the unacknowledged third partner in their marriage, a ghost of a secret that would forever shadow their lives. But the story doesn't end in bitterness. It ends in a deep, hard-won understanding. Elara learned that history isn't just dates and names in a book. It's a living, breathing, hungry entity that demands to be acknowledged. Julian learned that no secret, no matter how terrifying, is worth the price of a decade of lies. And that, my friends, is the terrifying tale of the Thorne anniversary. The guest list had names of people long dead, and those names almost cost two people everything. The world is full of houses that whisper, of family lines that carry debts far older than mortgages. The secrets you keep often have a much higher cost than the truths you tell. Think about that the next time you unpack a box of old family heirlooms or agree to take on a property with a long, unexamined history. Did you feel that chill down your spine? I know I did. If you enjoyed this journey into the depths of a family's supernatural burden, please hit that like button. Subscribe to Family Secrets Unveiled for more stories that lie just beyond the veil of the ordinary. And don't forget to ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into the shadows of the past. Until next time, stay safe and remember, not all guests check out.